We all have something to share. No share with Dr. Dave.
Hello, 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 hello. And welcome to the Knowledge Share with Dr. Dave podcast. I am Dave A. Cornelius, affectionately known as Dr. Dave. In this premiere episode of Humans Being Human, we're going to explore the essence of our existence, our emotions. We'll talk about some of our connections and this fragile balance between individuality and community. And there's several questions that we're going to pose and see if we could get our experts to give us some insights on. And we talk about what does it mean to be human anyway in this world that we're driven by speed, technology, and this frequent or constant change. And we want to figure out, how do we navigate authenticity in a world that we prioritize productivity over presence? And how do we stay connected in our humanity amidst just digital distractions of phones and many different things? But I don't have to answer that, which is a cool thing. I don't have to answer it because I have these great experts who wrote this book called The Power of Agency, and I'm not going to read the rest of it. And they're going to answer some of our questions. You know, we have Frederick A. Miller, who's the CEO of Khalil Jameson Consulting Group, Inc., and Judith H. Katz, a thought leader and practitioner and strategist. So we're going to bring them on stage, and we're going to have some great convo about, you know, what is humans being human. But before we start, we always need to start out with a song, some words of inspiration. I don't know who's going first, but I just look forward to it.
So here we go. All right. So I cannot do justice to this song. Cynthia Erivo did. So, but it's Defying Gravity. I mean, so here we go. It's time to try defying gravity. I think I'll try defying gravity, and you can't pull me down. Unlimited. Together we're unlimited. Together we'll be the greatest team that's ever been. Dreams the way we planned them. If we work in tandem, there's no fight we cannot win. Just you and I defying gravity. With you and I defying gravity. They'll never bring us down. That's it.
Well, bravi, right? Yay. We got to celebrate that. So I always like to, I don't introduce you, so I ask you to do a short introduction, elevator pitch if you choose. I said 30 seconds, but it's up to you. It's your time too.
I think the whole notion of defining gravity, and good job, Judith.
Yeah.
Thanks, Fred.
is really about what we do, which is bring about change, organizational change, system change, individual change. How do we make this world a better place? And how do we make organizations a better place? And it's got to defy the gravity of what's been and move to a new arc that will take us further than we could have possibly been in the old system. So Fred Miller, Khalil Jameson Consulting Group. We're a management consulting firm that specializes in culture betterment. How do you make the culture the way it needs to be so that it works for all human beings? We're located in Troy, New York, across the river from Albany, New York. And we have 15 consultants in the firm and about 7 of us who are in the Troy office doing the backroom work for the organization. We've been around since 1970, so 50-some years. We've been around as a consulting firm. Judith and I have worked together for 40-some years, and it's been a wonderful journey. We've kind of hit that moment when organizations knew they had to be different than the Industrial Revolution and not treat people like cogs in the wheel and like hands and feet, but really what I call people bringing their brains to work. And once they brought their brains to work, we bring the whole person to work. When it was just widgets and I just moved the widget from one spot to the other, I thought about vacation and retirement all the time. And that's why retirement was such a big deal. But once I bring my brain to work and I'm able to engage and bring my best thinking to the organization, then you got my whole body, which means all of me, which means not only what's happening in the workplace, but what's happening in my life outside of work. And how do we make it all work together and how do I integrate it? So that's the work that we do. So I'm a boomer, not going to retire. A workaholic, that's something I'm not proud of, but I enjoy. An optimist, a strategist. I love thinking about strategies. Show me a problem, show us a problem, and we'll try to figure out how to solve it. And we wouldn't be around for 50 years if we weren't good at solving problems for our clients. I see the positive in people, and I see the possibilities in organizations. So I'm feeling good about things. The world is in a not good place right now, and it's helping our clients kind of navigate through that. Because some people, the safest place in their life right now is the workplace versus all the other things that they're seeing. So love to be involved in change and making things better.
There you go. All right. Well, first of all, Dr. Dave, I love humans being human. I mean, I think that is the essence of kind of, as Fred said, our work and trying to figure out a place where humans can be human, right? To be who we are, be all of ourselves. As Fred has said, he's never retiring. Well, I kind of retired, but this is what retirement looks like, which is doing podcast writing and doing all of that, which means I do what I want to do when I want to do it, which is really a lovely thing. So I consider myself a change agent. I consider myself a consultant, a coach, an author, an educator, but basically trying to create a better world. And this is going to sound a little depressing, but I've been thinking about my tombstone. And what I want on my tombstone is she was a change agent who made a difference in the world.
All right.
So I want a bench. I don't necessarily need a stone, but that's part of what I'm thinking. So sometimes you just got to plan ahead. Or at least tell everybody
You're plotting
else.
the inevitable, right?
Really. I mean, or at least tell everybody else what they need to do when that time actually comes, but it's not going to come soon.
Yay.
And as Fred said, we've worked together for 40 years, which has been incredible. So that whole thing about working in tandem and there's nothing we can't do together, that's kind of how I feel about all of this. And, I think even in challenging times, we have to understand our history and kind of where we've been, as well as the possibilities for the future. And even though things may look bleak and hard, there is a strategy and a way to move forward. And I think we need to continually find that space and place. And I live in Washington, D.C. So right now, as you can imagine, it is a little crazy place to be.
I could only imagine, and I'm glad that I am not there. How's that?
I understand. Totally.
Hey, so, you guys have spent like decades, as Fred says. I didn't say it. Fred said it. Decades championing inclusion and transformational change. So from your perspective, what's the biggest misconception about creating this genuine inclusive environments, and how do we move beyond this noise that we have going on right now?
There's a lot of noise. I mean, I think what's happened is this has become like a soundbite, an acronym without meaning. So, it's interesting to say to people, so you don't want everybody to be included in the workplace? You don't want everybody to contribute? Nobody's going to say that. You don't want to be included in the work? I mean, if we really focus on the mission, the vision, the strategy of an organization and create a space and a place where everybody can bring their talent, their skills, their abilities, their thinking, as Fred talked about, knowledge workers, that's what inclusion's about. It's removing any barriers that don't get that voice to be heard, don't get that person to be able to share all their thinking and all the skills that they bring. So for us, I feel like, inclusion's gotten pigeonholed. It's become an acronym that's meaningless in many ways. And, even thinking about we've changed language so often. The question is the outcome. We want higher performance. We want places where people can contribute. We want places where humans can be human. And for us, inclusion means that I can bring my best self to work, that I can contribute, and that I really have the supportive energy from other people around me to be able to contribute and do my best work. But it is about mission, vision, and strategy. What are we here for? It's not inclusion for inclusion's sake.
Right.
So that's really the misconception, I think, that's being labeled right now, that I think we need to change.
And I don't know, Fred, if you're going to jump in or you're going to wait for the next question, or you just drop the mic.
I'll just say amen.
Amen. That's right. I'll take that. So, we have all these organizations that talks about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then you look at their culture and you see that it falls way beyond below their policies often, right? And so what is the most overlooked but essential element in genuinely shifting an organization culture to really embrace inclusion and really just focus on us, all of us, belonging too.
Underscore something that Judith said, which is it's got to connect to the mission, vision, and strategies of the organization.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the struggles with it in recent years has been people have just seen it a program unrelated to the enterprise. And we can say, well, it's related to the enterprise because there's people, and therefore people are here, and therefore they need to X, Y, and Z. Okay, but people are here for what purpose? The purpose that people are there for is to further the mission of the organization or implement strategies of the organization. Once it gets embedded in how we do business, once it gets embedded in the success of the enterprise, then it has longevity. And for some of these organizations dropping it these days, as they talk about the three initials DEI, they're dropping it because it never was integral to their success. They could drop it and be more successful or less successful, but it wasn't the critical factor. So it really talks about a collaborative effort. How do we get the people of the organization and the leaders of the organization working together to create the kind of climate and organization that's needed to be successful as an enterprise? Listening to the voices of the people, making sure that people feel heard. I'm today with a client, and we're having sessions where people from throughout the organization can come and talk about what do they see as opportunities for improvement and what are some of their suggestions. So really getting people engaged, getting them included in the thinking of the organization. We want people to feel like owners. I think that's a real shift. You think about the Industrial Revolution again, hands and feet. Now we're thinking about new age. Bring your brain to work. Bring generative AI into the process. We need people to think like owners. What would you do? We have one leader who asks people when they come to him, so if you were the owner of this organization, what would you do? Really enabling, empowering, and giving people agency to bring all they have to the organization. It's essential that people feel that power in order to build their highest performance, to do their best. I believe everybody has something to contribute to the organization. Everybody, no matter what, that old saying that many, many years ago before we went to the moon, somebody was, a group of visitors were walking through NASA and they saw the janitor and they said, "What's your job?" And the janitor said, "Put a person on the moon." It's that kind of thinking, that kind of collective thinking, that kind of, I'm a part of this organization. What we're trying to accomplish as an organization, I am contributing to, no matter what my job. It's all critical things that are important. And the other thing before us is inclusion is part of a journey of human beings being to add value. And so that's why we wrote the book about agency, because we think individual and team agency is a critical component of organizations being better tomorrow than they were yesterday. And so those are some of the components of what we see as critical to organizations taking a leap forward. I think a step forward is not enough. I think organizations need to take a leap forward so people can really feel like I not only do I have a place here, but I make a contribution here that really is significant.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, it's interesting. I remember once Fred and I were doing focus groups in an organization about kind of what had to change and what was working. And a woman came in with like 5 sheets of paper, handwritten with ideas that she had about how she could make the organization better. And we asked her if she shared it. She said, no, nobody ever asked. And so, this is what inclusion is. People have ideas. People have wisdom in the organization. And I think where we came with individual and team agency is ensuring that everybody from all roles, levels, tenured identities are able to bring that power, that influence, that decision-making into the organization and really work towards the betterment of the organization. And I think, as Fred said, when we have that, people feel like owners. They don't feel like, just tell me what to do. The lid has been taken off so they don't feel smothered or micromanaged, but they're able to bring all of that thinking that they have to the organization. And I think that's the piece about unleashing it. I have one other example. We were working in a plant, a manufacturing plant for a pharmaceutical, and they had a new target of increasing batch by X amount. And so it seemed like to the leaders that was daunting, right? And then because they were working on inclusion, because they were working on the voice, the leaders went to the front line and said, how do you think we can make this happen? They actually exceeded the targets. because they had ownership of the ideas, they had ownership, they were asked, and they could see opportunities that the leaders couldn't see. So this is why I think when we think about inclusion, it impacts bottom line performance. It impacts discretionary energy. It impacts all of that. And that's why we think individual and team agency is so critical to this conversation as well.
As you were speaking, I was, just thinking of a historical moment for a country like Japan, who uses some of these practices for improvements, right? This is where we got lean from, right? As we use this a lot in a lot of work that we do.
That's right.
Yeah. So in being human, we talk about vulnerability and it's a strength. I don't know who came up with that. I don't know who likes to be vulnerable. I've had to work on it. So it's not a natural thing. It's certainly not for me. So when we think about vulnerability, what role does it play in leadership, and how can these leaders help to balance openness with authority to foster, trust and belonging? Because that's huge. When you think of, the whole conversation of trust, that it really reduces the tax and the friction of getting things done. So I would love to hear your context about vulnerability and leadership.
When I think about, first of all, I think about trust is there's so many ways in which do I trust that I have the right people? Do I trust people in terms of doing their jobs? There's so many ways that shows out. I think vulnerability also leads to learning.
Yeah.
And when leaders can be vulnerable, they don't have to be the person who's the smartest person in the room. They don't have to have all the answers. That actually opens up a space when they're vulnerable. It doesn't mean that I splay out everything on the table, but it does mean that I'm open to other people and learning and sharing my concerns, sharing my worries in a way that others can then join me and support me and help me get better. And I think that's the piece that's missing very often in organizations, and when leaders think they have to be in control and command, as opposed to the fact that, no, we're in this together and I need everybody. I need that 360-degree vision to make better decisions because there's too many unknowns and unknowables. And so I don't think you can have absolute trust. I think you build it. But each pillar, what we always talk about is interactions build trust, build speed. And the more that I have those interactions with you, the more that we understand one another, the more that we are building that trust, then we can also make faster decisions because I'm not second guessing every decision that's being made. So there's so many payoffs for it in terms of that vulnerability. Again, I think about if we're not vulnerable, that means we build a wall, which also means we wall out information. Yeah. And that information is so critical, particularly now when organizations need that speed, when AI is going on, when all of this is happening. It's kind of like if I don't have that, then leaders actually miss out on a tremendous amount of information that would make them better leaders in the long run.
It's for leaders to get out of the conference rooms.
Yeah.
To be out among the people in the organization. And right now, leaders are snowed under with meetings and meetings and meetings, room to room to room, sometimes seeing the same people over and over and over again, and not seeing all the people in the organization. And yet we know that discretionary energy is what takes an organization from okay to great. It's hard to give discretionary energy because when you never see the leader of the organization. Hard to give discretionary energy when you feel like nobody knows you're there. So how do we make sure that people are having the connections, the interactions with their team members, but also with the leaders of the organization so they can see them being human. They can see that we're all in this together. They can see that they're feeling respected and valued as people in the organization. People need to have that in order to bring them full selves to the workplace and to give that discretionary energy that is so critical for higher performance. Leaders are going to have to change their behaviors. They're going to have to change their behavior pattern. They're going to have to see leading people. Leaders got the word lead in it for a reason. They got to see leading people as their primary responsibility. And that's not memos, and that's not emails, and that's not being in a room and giving out edicts. It's really being among the people or being engaged with them online, but making sure that that engagement is there so people can fully feel that you are with them, not above them, not about them, but with them.
You know, that's so good. As I'm such a lean thinker, so what popped into mind of being amongst the people is the concept of a Gemba walk,
Mhm.
go see, right?
Yes.
And so that's what's really needed out there for people to get connected with
Yeah.
everyone who's contributing, right, and building and providing value for the organization. But that also helps to break some of the cycle. I don't know if it breaks it, but it may help,
Eliminate.
to push away some of the cycles of bias and resistance, because we both have conscious and unconscious bias. And Judith, you were talking about shaping interaction and decisions and systems. So what strategies have you found most effective in breaking some of these cycles of bias, especially when facing deep resistance in leadership and an institution? I mean, we're having it today, we're dealing with it, right? So I'd love to hear your context on that.
So, I think one of the things is clear is that, first of all, I think resistance is always part of a change process.
Yes.
So it's going to be there. In fact, when we've been in some organizations where there hasn't been any resistance, I get really worried, because it means that everybody's given up. So it's kind of like, I don't care anymore. So you've got to lean into that and have the conversations, because underneath it, people will tell you what they need. Under that resistance, they'll tell you what their fears are or what they need. I think the bias thing, again, it's kind of like what we talked about, bias in a box, as opposed to how is it playing out in performance? How is it playing out in interactions? How is it playing out in a way that perhaps people aren't being seen fully for who they are? And I think that it's modeling the behavior of what you want from someone else is so important. I think just doing all the bias stuff alone just doesn't help us connect to each other as human beings. So how is it showing up? Is it showing up in an interaction we're having? And if so, can we do it in a way that talks about how do we get better? Is it getting in the way of our performance? I mean, all of that. And I think that that's where, again, back to vision, mission, strategy. Is it getting in the way of us being able to do what we're here to do? It's interesting when you talked about the Gemba walks, because a lot of times biases are based on the fact that we don't have data, right? We haven't seen each other face to face. We don't know enough about who you are. So we make up our own movies and we make up our own stories. And I think we got to get the stories from each other. And we know that when we interact, we break down those stories. And so it becomes a different story. It's like, why when people all of a sudden have gay friends, do they start thinking differently about gays and lesbians? And it's because they never knew anybody, so they could listen to it as a story as opposed to the truth. And I think that's the more we interact, the more we see each other, the more we see us as human beings, it makes a huge difference. But again, if we can address those issues when they're based in terms of our performance, it also makes that road and conversation a lot easier, I think, for sure.
I also think that as we talk about leaders' competency, a competency that is critical now is curiosity.
Mhm.
Is being willing to engage, ask questions, not know all the answers, and be curious about why the other person sees the world the way they do or the situation the way they do. That curiosity generates the other person's thinking, which then allows them to bring their whole self to the workplace, their creativity and their possibilities to the workplace. So we've been really talking to leaders about it's okay to be curious. As Judith just said, it's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay. The bottom line is you don't anyhow. But you don't have to fake it. Just own what you know and know that collectively y'all have more answers than any one individual separately.
So the whole saying of curiosity kills the cat doesn't apply anymore, right?
It helps the cat. It helps the cat.
It helps the cat. I love
Yeah.
it. Reframe the saying, right? Right, Fred and Judith?
Curiosity probably makes for a great leader.
Yeah. And I'm sure curiosity me also helps with empathy and compassion.
Absolutely.
Totally.
So when you think about your work and how it emphasizes the importance of empathy and compassion, how can we nurture these qualities in ourselves, others, especially in challenging times or when faced with different perspectives? And different perspectives is really loud and front and center right now.
People have gotten so entrenched that it's really hard because and there's so much that supports our bubbles.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a challenge. And the good news, I think, Fred and I working in a corporate context or in an organization that has a context makes it a little easier. Because I think if we're just talking about society at large, I'm not sure we can answer that question right now. But I do think when we're here to do a job together, it helps. And there's one construct that we've been using a lot, which is, do I enter an interaction from a judging stance or a joining stance? Do I start, do I started with a skepticism, like, what do you have to offer and I don't trust you? Or do I come with a joining stance that says, I'm not trying to find all the holes in your argument. I'm trying to see where I can join you, that I know you bring some wisdom. And I think that helps open up a space for people to begin to find some common ground and to begin to engage with one another. And so we don't, I came up as an academic, and one of the things that, you got a lot of points for was when somebody made a statement, you try to find where they were wrong or what was missing, or, where you could add value in terms of kind of like what was wrong with the statement. I think that's a very judging point of view. And a lot of people in a lot of organizations come from that frame of reference. What we're really trying to shift to is that joining, which says, I see you as a partner. I see you as bringing something. If I see it differently, again, curiosity, what am I missing? And I think those elements of curiosity, partnership, collaboration are so essential right now, even more so. So we have to see, where can I join you? Where can I find some agreement? Are there places where let's get out of the political polarization, but there are some things that we all want as human beings. We want joy, we want love, we want families, we want to be able to have a decent life. There are some things that no matter what we want, we may disagree on how, but let's at least find some baseline that we can all agree to. And I think that helps us find some common ground, which is essential right now. So I don't know, Fred, if you have anything else, maybe you're being nice and being kind.
One of the things that we start thinking about, and other people are talking about also, is the difference between nice and kind. We did a lot of work out in Minnesota. I had several clients out there, and they used to talk about Minnesota nice. And that was, you really don't say what's really on your mind. You really don't say the full story about what's happening to the other person, that you kind of just get nice and get out of there. I see a lot of organizations where people are trying to avoid conflict, and they feel like conflict happens when you tell the truth to somebody else and give them real feedback. And that's not really being kind at all. So that's when you're not giving people what they need to know to be better, and you're being nice about it, you are denying them the ability to improve, the opportunity to improve. So really being kind is giving people the straight feedback. Real being kind is telling people what they need to know so they can be better tomorrow than they were yesterday. And so we've been saying to our clients, and I think COVID's helped some of this. Everybody was acting like they were fragile and others were fragile. So they were kind of just being nice with people and trying not to have any challenges or conflict. And now we're saying, no, that's not going to work. It's not going to create high performance. Being kind to a person is telling them what they need to know so they can be better. Being kind to a person is letting people know how you feel about them and what you're thinking, all in a kind way, but in a way that they have more information about themselves than they would otherwise. So we see this as a real shift in organizations, because I think people are reluctant to have those kind of conversations because they're afraid of the conflict. And yet we know that by mixing it up, we come out better in our thinking, in our debates, in our discussions, in our interactions, than trying to avoid and stay away. And so that's a competency that becomes more and more critical as organizations want to be higher performing, want to be inclusive, and clearly want to have opportunity for teams and individuals to practice agency. They're going to practice agency, there are going to be bumps. How do we move through those bumps?
It's feedback, and I've heard this several times. This one guy that I used to work with, I was coaching him and this organization, and he always would say, feedback is a gift. Feedback is a gift. And when I'm hearing you talking about feedback, that's a really, real important thing. It's something that I've had to learn to absorb and take in, right? And really learn from. Talking about being vulnerable, right? Learn from getting feedback. It's a tough thing for many people, but if it's done well and it's done in a helpful way,
That's right.
then you could be better.
I'm going to use a word we don't use in corporations a lot, but if it's done with love,
Oh, I love that
then
word.
then people can hear it.
Yeah.
If it's done with I'm one up or you're one down. If it's done with I'm smarter than you. If it's done with any of that rank, then it comes across as attack. But if
Yeah.
it's done with I'm saying this because I care about you, I care about the situation, and I care about the us that we can be, then it's in a whole different area.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to pivot and start talking about the future of human connection in the digital world. And so AI is a big thing. You know, you remember when the fourth industrial revolution video came out, and it's like all these different things that's coming to get us. Well, it's here.
It's getting us.
Getting us, you know. And so with the rise of AI and all this digital communication, you know, how do we ensure that we still have human connection, empathy, inclusion, and it remains at the forefront of how we work and live? You know, because it's easy to just sit here in this box with a video and a mic, and you know, that's how we connect. So I'm interested to hear your context about that.
Judith, I'm wondering if you might talk about our definition of agency, and then we can lead into this.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I said a little bit of before, that agency is ensuring that all people of all roles, all levels, tenure, and identities have the power, influence, and voice to make choices and decisions related to their jobs and the betterment of the organization. When people have individual and team agency, they feel an obligation to speak up and to raise tough issues when something is misaligned with the mission, vision, key strategies, and values of the organization. They feel accountability. They feel and act like owners for organization success. And I think that for us, it's really understanding that, you know, when the pandemic happened, I think it really shifted so many people's thinking about what they wanted out of work, what they wanted out of their interactions, how they wanted to live. And we saw agency as people taking back some of the power in terms of their life. And I think when you speak about AI, which I think Fred will talk about in a minute, you know, the question is, do we want AI to take over our lives, or do we want to be able to be engaged with AI in a way that strengthens our lives? And I think that's really some of the choices that we're faced with as we go forward. So agency becomes even more important when we think about AI and generative AI. So take it away, Fred.
Can't wait.
I keep thinking about the image of the computer being asked a question of solving a problem and giving us a response in like half a minute. And then human beings taking the next 6 months to figure out how to make it happen and implement it. We cannot be the slow part of the system. And if we don't learn individual and team agency, if we don't learn to include all the right people, if we don't learn to respect one another and appreciate one another, if we don't learn how to partner together, we're going to be the holdup in progress, in the thinking, in the evolution of what's happening in organizations. So AI, it's here. It's here to stay. It's going to keep getting smarter, faster. What do we bring to it? We bring ingenuity to it. We bring empathy to it. We bring a collective thinking that I still think is superior, and seeing angles that cannot be seen, and sometimes even by the smartest computers. So I feel like we are at a time when we embrace it. I remember when cell phones first came out and people were like, I'm not sure I want a cell phone. Okay, keep that thought for a while.
Yeah.
AI is here. It's here. It's a partner. We might be wearing generative AI. It might be just in the air. It might be in the walls. We'd be able, just like people in their home now can ask a question and Siri gives them an answer. It's going to be our partner. But we have to live up to being a partner and a good partner, which means that we have to bring all our skills. But more important than that, we got to bring our collectiveness to it. We as human beings are always better together than separate. How do we have that be the way that we operate going forward so that we can create the speed of decision making that is necessary for us to be able to be in a world that's going to be many times faster than it is now?
Judith, you're going to
Yeah.
add something to that?
Well, the only thing I would say is there's so many ways in which generative AI and AI itself are in our lives that we're not even aware of. I mean, it's just so ubiquitous. So to think that we can almost separate ourselves out or separate from it is not the case. But I do think that I'm back to humans being human. AI is not human.
Yeah.
And as much as we try to model it after us, use our data, use all the information, I think human beings still have those qualities of what it means to be human and connectedness and all of that. And I think, as much as, the movies will show she and that becomes your partner, that the AI becomes your partner instead of a human being, I don't think that's really going to be the way the world is, at least in my foreseeable future. So I do think, though, we have to really hone in on the uniqueness of human beings and what we bring. And we have to hone that instrument as well and really tune that up to make sure that we keep our uniqueness and what we bring around that.
With all technology, there's a good and there's a bad. And I think we have to be very cautious about the downside of generative AI and that it's learning from the internet, which is probably the worst teacher there is on earth. And so how do we manage that? How do we partner with generative AI and at the same time make sure we don't fall prey to thinking it's smarter than us? And if it said it, it knows it better than us. Because there's some things about what we learn in our life experience as human beings that we need to always bring with us and make sure that we're living in a world that's better for every human being tomorrow than it was yesterday.
Yeah. So, with that, the thought is test everything and hold on to the good, right?
Yes.
That's the mindset because, the generative AI is learning from us through the internet, which it has all of the good and bad that's involved with us. But as human beings, we have the opportunity to make choices.
That's right.
And we also have the opportunity for redemption when we do things that are not helpful to other people or even harmful to other people. We have that opportunity. And so I think that will never go away. And without those two things, I'll watch my language. I'll just watch my language.
We understand.
You understand, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Fred.
It's also why I focus my life on organizations, because there's a lot more clarity in organizations than there are outside of organizations in community and in countries. So clear purpose, vision, strategies. We got to work together. We're all here to do something together. We got some common values and some common ways of operating. And so with our clients, we really work on what are the values you're going to have? What are the principles you're going to operate under? Let's get clear about that. And I say again and again, a lot of the great societal changes have started in our corporate sector. It's brought about some of the changes. While being clients where in certain parts of the country, the group of people that we brought that were diverse in that facility or in that plant was more diverse than any group within 100 miles of where we were standing. And so organizations have done a lot of things to help move forward the kind of evolution of our thinking and our interaction and our socialization related to differences. And we need to keep those interactions going. And we need to know that there's dimensions of that are critical to us as human beings, feeling valued, appreciated, and continuing to evolve.
So let's talk about the success for the future. The future of humanity itself, right? So what are humanity's most significant challenges and opportunities, right? As we look into the future, and how can we leverage our collective human experience to move forward with wisdom and compassion?
I mean, it's a big question, Dr. Dave.
Hey.
This is not like one of the, off the top of our heads, a simple thing. I mean, I think we're seeing the difference between, and I'm going to use a political reference, Doge right now, seeing people as headcount or a commodity versus understanding people in terms of the value that they bring and the difference that they can make. And I think we've seen it in many organizations where, people are seen as headcount versus people are seen as assets. I think the real challenge and opportunity for us as human beings is that we really are an asset, that we really do bring a difference. Fred was talking about organizations. You wouldn't build a building with one kind of architect, for example. You need the multitude of skills to build that building, right? You need a multitude of backgrounds and experiences and trades, etc. And I think that's the real opportunity for human beings, is all the multitude of what we can bring, all of our differences, all of our skills, all of our experiences, and not just see us as a number, not just see us as human beings as a head count, and not just see us as not being human. And so I think it's tapping into that rich resource of what people bring that's so important for our future, and has been an innovation that we've had throughout the world. That's what people can bring. And I think that's the part that I think we need to hold on to, is tapping into that brilliance, tapping into that possibilities. When we're in survival, we're not able to really think about things in a broader way. And so really creating this organizations and the space where people can bring all of that is really what I think is most significant in terms of our opportunity, but it's also the biggest challenge. For sure. And then Fred, talk about small ball versus big ball. I like that. I love that example.
Yes, and I will. And also, it's people want to know that somebody cares about them. And so as we talk about our organization, we talk about interaction, people want to know, I count, I matter, you see me. This is all the stuff that we talked about around diversity and inclusion, that I count, that I'm a human, I'm not just a widget, that you understand me, that you care about me. When people feel cared about, we talk about great sports teams, right? What do they always say? The coach is like one of us. The coach is a player coach. The coach cares about what we do, what we think. The coach cares about how I am. How many times do you see the coach being the first person on the field when somebody gets injured? I mean, that caring. How do we show that caring to each other? First, got to show how do we show that caring to ourselves? Yeah. And I think in times like we're living, where there's so many stressors around, how we have to take care of ourselves. We have to make sure that we're eating and exercising and doing all the things that are necessary. And then we need to show that caring to others. And in the organization, the ones that show they care about their people, that their people count, that their people are included, that they have agency, are all places where people are going to do their best work. And they're going to do it because they're going to feel like they're an owner. They're going to feel like this is a place for me. And they're going to stay. They're going to stay, which is critical. The story about small ball and how that started. So I'm on the advisory board of an organization, and we have a course that people go through for high performers in the organization to enhance their skills. And then after several months of the course, they come and they present their findings to the leaders of the organization and to the advisory board. So this group did a great presentation. It was really, really good. And it really talked about we can go big, we can go medium, or we can go small as far as implementing what the strategy might be going forward. And I'm so excited because they've made such a great case for going big. I'm like, I can't wait for them to say this because I think this organization is ready for it. And they said, so we decide we go small. And I'm like falling out of my chair. I'm like, I can't believe that they just did that. And I'm sitting there and they're explaining, going small was like, do we hire one person to take on this new project and area, or do we hire a team of 5 or 6 to do it? So they decided one person. In this organization, there's no doubt about it. You put one person in a job to try to change something, they won't survive a week. So, I mean, it wasn't even a winning strategy on any scorecard. So they go back and they explain why, I mean, they're in the room and the leaders are there and the CEOs there and all this stuff. And at some point I say, I just have one question. One is I'm shocked y'all said go small, because I would have thought y'all would have said go big, because I thought you made a great case for that. I said, if this was your company, what would you have recommended? And there's like 10 of them or 15 of them in a group. And I asked each one, like in a jury, when you said, what was your verdict? I asked each one, what would you have done if it was your company? What would you have done? And they went around the room. I would have gone big. I would have gone big. I would have gone big. I would have, to a person. They all said, I would have gone big. I said, what the hell? Why did y'all just recommend small? And then they went on to talk about the organization and the culture, and they didn't think the leaders would go for it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, this is what's wrong, folks. This is what's wrong. If everybody's playing small ball and not taking the lead, that doesn't mean you got to play big ball all the time and go for the fences and hit home runs. But you got to go for a home run periodically. And there are times like this situation where if they went for a home run, I think the leaders would have been able to lean into that. But they didn't even try that. It's like daddy won't let me or mommy won't let me. So I won't even ask them, can I go out and play right now? And I'm like, how much is that is happening in our organizations?
Right.
And I think it's happening a lot. And that's not going to create great organizations. And it's not going to have people feel fulfilled in their work.
I mean, that goes back to the question you raised, Dr. Dave, about challenges and opportunities, right? Is that if everybody's playing small ball because we're fearful about the response, we are so under-leveraging everything, as opposed to really going for and being brave about what will make change or what will make a difference or what I do need to be able to do my best work. So I think this is such an important metaphor and it's such an important concept in terms of how much are we all playing small ball or how much are we playing, at least medium, if not big ball in all of this, which is exercising our agency.
That's just such a wonderful metaphor. And I'm just keeping track of time. So why do you think individual and team agency is so critical at this point?
Lots of reasons. I'll do a few and Judo can do a few.
Okay.
One is we got to speed up our decision-making process. We got to get it faster. We can't, the AI and everything's calling for that. Two is we have a lot of leaders doing jobs 2 or 3 levels below what they're getting paid to do, which means the people down below are feeling smothered. And when we were writing the book, The Power of Agency, our publisher said, what's the opposite of agency? And we thought about it and said smothered. There are a lot of people who feel smothered in the organization. So we need to speed up decision-making. We need to get the accountability where it belongs. We get the leaders moving back up to their jobs and not trying to come down the organization. People want autonomy and they're ready for authority. Let's give it to them in our organizations. We don't need a checker, checking the checker all the time. Even with all that, we still make mistakes in our organization. So if we get rid of some of the checkers, we're not going to be any worse off. But I predict we'll be better. Because when I was many, many years ago working in Connecticut General Life Insurance Company, now called Cigna, I was one of those people who did a task and then I had a checker behind me. And then eventually I didn't need a checker. But I made more mistakes when I had a checker than when I didn't have a checker. Because I knew there was somebody checking me. When I felt like nobody was checking me, I felt more accountable. And I made sure I made fewer mistakes. How many people would be even a higher performer if they didn't know that 5 people were going to be looking over their shoulder and looking at their work and then making them go back and redo it, sometimes just to redo it. And then finally, discretionary energy. Higher performing organizations succeed because of discretionary energy. If everybody just did their job description, organizations would not be as high performing as they can be. So discretionary energy becomes absolutely critical. And that's what we got to get. You get that through having people feel they have agency, they feel included, they feel valued, and they feel like somebody cares about what they think.
Love that. I mean, the only thing I'd ask is people want to contribute, period.
Yeah.
I mean, they just want to contribute. It's interesting. Verna Myers talked about how diversity is being invited to the dance, inclusion is being asked to dance. We think that agency is co-creating the dance. And I think people want to co-create the dance. They want to have voice, who's coming to the party, what are we serving, and be able to have an influence in that way. And I think people want to contribute. They want to make a difference. They don't want to waste their life. And I think that's the essence of why agency is so important. And it leads to higher performance for everybody. So why not? Let's have it.
So there's one question for one of our listeners, and maybe we could get that answered in a few minutes. So I'm going to put that out there, and she was asking, in cases where leaders don't allow players to play big ball, what do you recommend players do?
No. Well, it's that big ball. It's changing a culture. I always say, find an ally in the organization. Find someone else who sees the world the way you do and is willing to join you in thinking. And then you have two. And then the two of you find two more and have four. Then you got, at some point, you got to find one of the leaders with power in the organization that you think really believes in what we're talking about. And more leaders, and there's examples of organizations that are doing this, that believes in this. And approach that leader and say, I think we could be even a better organization. And here's some of the things that were holding us back. And here's some of the things that I think we could do to really move us forward. If you pick the right leader, and I hunch you have, they're going to join you in that. And then you have a movement. This is a movement. This is a movement for higher organizational performance. This is a movement to allow individuals in the organization to bring more of themselves to the organization. Your phrase, humans being human. And this is a movement to let leaders move to the work that's going to create an even greater organization. So I think you start with one and you build from there. I always hear, when we first started talking about the book on agency, our senior leadership group CEO and others, they all said, we love this concept, but we don't have it. I think there's an opportunity to talk about how, if people in the organization have more individual and team agency, the organization is going to be even better. I think that will ring true for many, many, many leaders.
Great.
Most excellent. So I'm going to close if Judith has nothing else to offer at this point.
I love everything Fred said.
I love everything Judith said.
and so
I would say we started with defying gravity, because that's really that's what change is about. Change is defying gravity. And so I think that fits well with what we're talking about. And we can do this. We humans can do this. We people in organizations can do this. This is all possible. And by the way, there's no other choice. We have to evolve, and we have to create better organizations for human beings to live in.
I totally agree. So I'm going to take you guys off of the stage for a minute, and I'll bring you back on. Don't worry. So let me go ahead and close. And I just want to say, thank you for joining us for this premiere episode of Humans Being Human. As we wrap up this first episode of Humans Being Human, one thing is clear. Being human isn't about having all the answers, but about asking the right questions. In a fast-moving world where technology and expectations push us to be more efficient, more productive, more connected, perhaps the most profound thing we can do is slow down and be present. And then I say slow down and be present. That's really important. And we need empathy, vulnerability, and belonging. These are not luxuries. They form the foundation of our existence and experiences. The challenge lies not just in understanding what it means to be human, but in living it fully with courage, intention, and heart. So, as you step away from this conversation, or even lean into this conversation, ask yourself, how can I show up more human today? So in our next episode of Humans Being Human, my friend Marilyn Johnson will join us to discuss relationships and connection. Fun stuff, talking about the dynamics of relationships. And one thing that I want to tell you to go out and do, right? I was given the opportunity to let me see if I could move my big head out of the way. I was given the opportunity to really get a copy of the book, The Power of Agency: Cultivating Autonomy, Authority, and Leadership in Every Role. So I took a picture and I sent it out, and I shared it with everyone that I can. And so go out there and get this book. This is a really great read. I'm really having a great time reading it and sharing it. And I also wanted to just let you know that, you could grab that book, on Amazon or wherever else you get your books, right? This is really important stuff that we get a chance to pay attention to and learn more about ourselves, and especially in building teams. In addition, I wanted to talk to you about my wonderful book that I've recently written, and my big head is in the way. It's called Generative Leadership to Thrive. And it's a book that you could find on Amazon, and it comes in multiple forms in terms of Audible and things like that. So I really appreciate you like showing up today. So in just bringing this to closure, I just want to say just thank you for joining us on this journey. And before I go, I think I'm going to bring them back, because I think I want to see if they have one more thing. We have a few more minutes, and I wanted to see if there's one more thing, a little bit that you want to add that our members walk away from, or listeners walk away from and said, oh, wow, thank you. So go for it. Anything else you would like to
say? That we're not alone, that many of us, everybody's listening, everybody that's viewing this, that we're on a journey. We got to stick together. We got to support one another. But change is in the air, and it's not all bad change. There are spots and places where people are doing extraordinarily wonderful things. We got to keep those flames going and spread. I'm an optimist. We're going to do this. We're going to succeed. Human beings are going to continue to evolve in good ways. We might have a hard time now, but this is not our destiny.
Yeah, and I would just say that, if you look at the trajectory of history, you'll see that out of really challenging times come some of the most innovative, creative times of music, art, theater, and innovation. And I think the more that people focus on what's possible instead of what's not, focus on the opportunities and not the limitations, I think it frees up our energy and frees up our abilities to be more human. And I love, Dr. Dave, everything you're talking about, because I think coming back to the essence of who we are and not getting caught up in the world of social media, all the craziness that's going on in the world that we can't control, but focusing on those things in which we can make a difference will matter to everyone. Remember to love the people around you, to be kind, to be thoughtful. I think those are the best ways for us to really be the essence of who we are as human beings. And the world needs us and needs that right now, particularly. So I think that's the answer.
I agree. So thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and above all, stay human.
Thank you.
Let's talk about it. Let's go deep. We all have something to share. No share with Dr. Dave.